1, we're live.
Hello and welcome to the Merton Council Cabinet meeting today, the 22nd of March. Pleased to see everybody so we'll get started. First of all, item 1 is apologies. The only apology of a kind is that Councillor Natasha Irons is still on her maternity leave. I'm pleased to say all is going well. However, this is the last meeting that she won't be attending. By the time that we come back after the council's annual meeting, she'll be back in place. So this will be the last meeting for our interim cabinet member, Councillor Mike Brunt. And I'd like to use this opportunity during apologies to thank him for his service to the council at this time and for being the first ever Merton interim cabinet member. Thank you very much for that. Also, if I'm permitted, I'll just say that an extra bit of news for Mike, for Councillor Brunt, is that actually the Labour group plans to nominate Mike to be the next mayor of Merton, which is a fantastic honour, and hopefully that will be ratified by the council in May. So the Labour group is pleased to nominate Mike to become the next mayor of Merton. He's a sterling record of service to the borough, including as a former council leader, and has most recently agreed to be Merton's first ever interim cabinet member to cover maternity leave. And we wish him good luck. Mike, would you like to say anything?
Thank you very much, Leader. Well, yes, two thank yous really. One is for the opportunity and the honour of coming back into the cabinet and covering for Natasha while she's been on maternity leave. It goes back 30 years that a colleague of mine, Sandy Cowling, had a baby in 1991 and had to go through council meetings as chair of the schools committee and have the baby with her, Patrick, my godson, and was breastfeeding in meetings. And I think whilst there is no problem at all with mothers breastfeeding wherever, it actually was good that Natasha has been able to spend time with her new baby and do what in any other employment opportunity someone would have the right to do. So that's been an honour to do that. I'm glad to hand back to her. She's a safe pair of hands on that. And on the honour of being the mayor-elect or mayor nominated, I'm really looking forward to it. I never expected to be mayor, and the more I think about it, the more I think it'll be an opportunity to meet so many people in the borough and to celebrate coming out of lockdown and the incredible effort that everyone who's caring for others in the community has put in over this last year. I think it's going to be a year of celebration of carers. That's what I'd like it to be. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you and good luck. Obviously there'll be many more opportunities to say this at later meetings, but I'd also like to place on record, I'd like to thank Councillor Sally Kenny for her hard work and dedication representing Merton during what's been an extraordinary mayoral term, especially during the second wave of the pandemic. Sally has highlighted the everyday efforts of residents to help their neighbours by setting up the Mayor's COVID-19 Award, which recognises the community spirit that makes Merton a great place to live. Sally has also tirelessly fundraised to support her two nominated charities, the Merton and Morden Guild of Social Services and Morden Little League. And I'm sure we all want to pass on our great thanks to her. Obviously, she's still got a month or two left, so good luck to her during that. Anyway, that very prolonged apologies for absence over with. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members have a prejudicial interest that they wish to declare? I can't see any, so we'll move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of February. Again, can those be agreed?
Yeah.
Lots of nodding and no deferring from it, so we will take those as agreed. So on to the main part of the business. Item 4 is reference from the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, HGVs, roadworks and school streets. And the first of our speakers on this is the Chair of Sustainable Communities panel, which is Councillor Aidan Mundy. So Aidan, if you want to unmute yourself and say something for up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Leader. And thank you very much. And thanks everyone who contributed to this report and recommendations to the panel, particularly those officers who managed to attend on the evening. So I'm briefly going to touch on the three general themes. So obviously HGVs, but how we would utilise our data and platforms to drive behaviour change. And obviously next steps in our fantastic School Streets programme. So on HGVs briefly, obviously we know from the data locally, but also from the Freight Carbon Review that while HGVs make a significant contribution to greenhouse gases, they also have a large potential to help us cut them through demand side measures, but also improve logistics, traffic flows and such forth. Obviously, a lot of this is outside Merton Council's gift, but some of it is. And we, in our meeting, we touched on the fact that actually was led by officers. It was fantastic to hear how that when we look to renew contracts in the future, how would we would incentivize those providing, for example, the waste contract in the future may have an element in there that would talk about vehicles which are green or electric or gas or whatever means in order to make sure that they are as green as possible. In terms of how would we utilize data and platforms, we talked about the importance of empowering residents and increasing reporting to aid decisions, because naturally the reports that you get are only based on the input the residents put into them. If we don't know there's an issue or to do with emissions, we won't be able to tackle it. So the key thing here was how do we bring that together and then use our website to provide both information, but the future new technologies coming on board with the new graphical interface system, so the new mapping technology we've procured, how do we use that to tell the story, but then at the same time show residents, pollution hotspots and also other bits of the emissions journey, so we can actually help that. But also when we also touched on roadworks as well. So how do we use all these new digital tools to help that and help residents and to explain what's coming up as well. And finally, just obviously we've got a fantastic School Streets programme. We know the impact it has made, but we also know that through challenges which aren't that aren't trivial, geography, that not all schools are part of the School Streets programme. So what we're asking is how can we do the best we can do to implement some sort of School Streets light program, so to speak. So those areas which unfortunately, because of the type of road they're on, can't be part of it, can have at least some elements or some features to bring the very best from that. But otherwise, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk on this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Mundy. To respond to the report is our Cabinet Member responsible, Councillor Martin Milton.
I'd like to firstly thank Councillor Mundy and the Sustainable Communities Overview and Scrutiny Panel for the extensive work they did at their last panel meeting. I'd like to also take this opportunity of thanking the number of residents groups who made a submission to the panel. That is greatly appreciated and helps to give feedback on this area, which does cause concern to people within the borough. I think the council has done quite a lot of work in terms of this area, and where there is financial resources available, we will be able to carry out wider work. But I will have to say it does involve a wider approach across London as a whole. I think it is important that we move towards more carbon neutral vehicles. I welcome that. I think that will be essential in terms of reducing emissions, but also as well in terms of other vehicles where arguably there's even greater emissions, especially from cars. I think on the point in relation to school streets, I'm proud that Merton has one of the highest proportion of school streets of any London borough. And I'd like to pay tribute to the work of the officers in terms of rolling that out across the borough. It's something that has been incredibly popular with many parents, and it's also made the environment outside schools considerably safer as a whole. It's something I welcome. In terms of future school programs, yes, I would like to see more schools, streets introduced in the borough. Given their success, we have had further requests from people at Joseph Hood and Dundonald. There may also be other schools, and clearly they will be considered in time. We think that they are of benefit, and they do promote active forms of travel, including walking and cycling. So I'll be working closely with my colleague, Councillor Lanning, on that. So to conclude, thank you to the scrutiny panel for their recommendations, which are incredibly helpful and for the work they undertook at the scrutiny panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I just wondered whether it's worth bringing in the lead officer, the Director for Environment and Regeneration at this point, Chris Lee, whether there's anything you'd like to add to Councillor Welton's response there.
Thanks, Chair. Little to add, really. I mean, it was a very topical, lively discussion on a range of reports that have been summarised well this evening. And this is a very fast-moving area. There's lots of activity going on across London to improve air quality, to drive carbon reduction and to improve road safety. So we're learning from other London boroughs as well as leading ourselves. And within existing resources, there's always room for improvement. And if Cabinet accepts this report, we'll be looking to see how we can respond as positively as we can to the recommendations, using the new technology that's emerging to look at how we can utilise that in addressing some of the objectives set out in the paper. So happy to work on this, Chair, and bring forward a further paper to a future Cabinet meeting in due course.
No, that's excellent. And a couple of Cabinet members indicated that they wanted to just make a comment briefly. First was the Cabinet member for Women and Equalities, Councillor Marcy Skeet. When you're ready, Marcy.
Hello. I would just like to talk a bit about the pollution. Pollution access affects the underprivileged mostly. It is a great cause of lung cancer, heart disease, asthma, and diabetes, which you will find that the underprivileged people are more prone to get these diseases because they are more liable because of the access to pollution. So I think that pollution really affects the underprivileged and disadvantaged more than the richer people. Thank you.
Very good. And also Councillor Rebecca Lanning.
Thank you, Chair. And also, I just wanted to say thank you to Councillor Mundy for providing useful context to what was a really dynamic committee meeting where these points were discussed. I just wanted to really quickly pick up on the HGV point, because I think it's really important as especially if we're looking at sort of the context of COVID, meaning that more people are ordering for delivery in addition to the sort of general shift towards online shopping. So I think it's really important that we look at what more we can do. And I know Chris has mentioned it already and is closely involved in sort of a pan-London approach to this. But just specifically on that point, I think it's also really encouraging that findings from our Clean Air Village found that HGVs are not a key contributor to air pollution in the borough, but rather that sort of private vehicles are far greater in that respect. So I think generally in terms of our approach to reducing air pollution in the borough, it's really important that we continue to retain a focus across all vehicle types. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you. I think that's the end of our contributions. So bearing in mind what Councillor Welton and other colleagues have said about the really good work that's already going on in this area already, and the constraints on resources that everybody knows are placed upon local authorities. I think this is a good report, and I think we're happy to accept recommendation 1. Can I put that to the test? Do we agree? Recommendation 1? Nodding and hands, no dissent, so that's agreed. Thank you very much. So we move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the public consultation on proposed plan Wimbledon neighbourhood area and forum. To speak on this, the Cabinet member again is Councillor Martin Walton.
Thank you, Chair. I formally move the report and recommendations. On the 19th of February, a community group, Plan Wimbledon, applied to the council to become a neighbourhood forum for parts of the borough around Wimbledon. Under the neighbourhood planning legislation, 6 weeks of public consultation should inform the council's decision as to whether to designate this neighbourhood forum. It is proposed that 6 weeks of public consultation takes place between the 12th of April and 23rd of May on the proposed area. This is not impacted by the pre-election period, which started today as it is a statutory obligation. The results of this consultation will help inform the council's decision on whether to designate it or not as a neighbourhood forum for the specific area they propose. They may also choose to amend their proposals following consultation feedback. This report also grants delegated authority to the Director in conjunction with myself to approve any amendments to the consultation documents that may arise prior to the public consultation. The background of the plan is that under the Localism Act 2011, local communities can produce neighbourhood plans, neighbourhood development orders and community right to build orders. Neighbourhood plans allow communities to shape development and growth in their local area and form part of the statutory development plan for the area once they are adopted. The first stage of this process is that a community group must make an application to the council to be the forum for the specific area, which they have done. The forum is established for the express purpose of promoting or improving the social, economic and environmental well-being of an area that consists of or includes the neighbourhood area concerned, with membership open to the following: individuals who live in the area, work in the area, and also elected councillors. In line with government guidance on neighbourhood planning officers, Plan Wimbledon have engaged with us prior to submitting their application and in accordance with the legislation. It has also been possible for them to amend their application in response to the feedback before we consider this report at Cabinet's June meeting. It will also allow them an opportunity to address any concerns arising from consultees' responses. The Cabinet will then determine whether or not to recommend this designation to full council in July. Once designated, that neighbourhood forum would be the only permitted forum for that specific area for the next 5 years and the only group capable of making a neighbourhood plan within the area. I ask Cabinet to formally approve the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Martin. And I'll just bring in again, I see we've got a number of officers here, including Tara Butler, but the Director is Chris Lee again. I wondered whether you or Tara had anything that you wanted to add to Councillor Welton's introduction there.
Nothing to add, Chair. Happy to answer any questions. I suppose the only point is to note that we're solely dealing here with the registration of this organisation rather than their plans and intentions for the area. So it is a tightly defined statutory process that we're proceeding with, and it's new to Merton. We haven't had any applications before, but happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure that Tara is more than capable as well.
Okay, that's very good. Sorry. So obviously, one of the things that that we need to consider is obviously that that the neighbourhood group would need, as part of the process, to support the growth agenda and to help achieve the target that the government has given us to build new, much needed homes for our residents. And pretty sure that that's something that the group is going to want to take seriously. Is there anything that Councillor Welton would like to say about that, or Chris?
I think what I probably will add, obviously, it has to be in accordance with the London plan, and they do obviously have to actively engage with residents. But obviously, our housing targets are important, and that any plan that does come forward is in alignment with that.
Yeah, there's nothing in the application to suggest that their work wouldn't be consistent with the London plan, but I'll ask Tara to add anything from her perspective.
Yes, that's correct, Chris. There's nothing in the application to say that that the group would do something contrary to the statutory and strategic policies in the London plan, and they'd also have to conform to national policy, which is also pro-growth.
Excellent. So we're going to be working with a pro-growth group that's going to help us to deliver our targets. Now we just need to go through the next process. Is there anything else that anybody would like to add, or shall we move to the recommendations, which agree to begin a 6-week consultation? The recommendations A and B. Everybody in agreement with that? Thumbs and nobody shaking their head vigorously, so I'll take that as no dissent. So that's agreed. Thank you very much. Then the next item is item 6, the additional restrictions grant discretionary scheme policy. We have an outside speaker that's registered to speak on this if they want to bring their camera and microphone on. It's Brian Raven, the Managing Director of White Light Limited. I'd like to welcome you to our meeting. You have 3 minutes to address the Cabinet, and we're interested in what you've got to say. Nice to meet you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. White Light has been a local business since 2001, supplying technology and services to the live events industry and broadcast industries. Over 50% of our business is supplying theatre and corporate events. As such, we've seen over 50% of our income disappear for over a year. We've managed to expand our offering to broadcast as well as continue with some installations, but the bulk of our work that comes out of our base in South Wimbledon has gone. Pre-COVID, we employed 270 staff, with 200 of them based in Wimbledon. Over 50 of them were Merton residents, many of them living in Mitcham, for example. Approximately 100 also lived relatively locally in Croydon, Wandsworth, and so on. 18 of these staff were either current or former apprentices, and we were a London living wage employer until the pandemic meant we had to reduce salaries. We also had to make 98 redundancies, including 22 of the team who live in Merton. We're obviously using furlough wherever possible, but we've still had to pay full rent of nearly £1 million for the last year and full business rates of nearly 200,000. But both Aviva and London Borough of Merton have given us time to pay this money over the next few months. We anticipated making losses in the region of £4 million this year and have borrowed £3 million to cover most of these losses. We don't believe that the events and theatre industries will return to pre-COVID levels until this time next year, as we will be one of the last sectors back to work. Along with other companies in Merton, we are a supplier to these industries. Therefore, we have never been told to close, but our customers have. Therefore, we have not qualified for any support from anything other than furlough and now the ARG. Representations to MPs, ministers and various government departments simply point us in the direction of taking on more debt or point us at the additional restrictions grant. The events industry suppliers are specifically named in the latest ARG guidelines that were issued this afternoon. We're obviously very grateful for the £25,000 we were already received in phase 1. Also very grateful for the ease of the process. It was one of the most painless applications I've had to do. However, we are very disappointed that we are excluded from phase 2 because we employ more than 50 employees and we have a turnover of over 10 million. Why is the employee of a large employer, who I would say is more likely to bounce back quicker, worth less support to the council than an employee of a micro or small business? I would anticipate that as work returns, we will be employing at least another 50 staff, hopefully from a local and diverse background. And by supporting employers like White Light, you are helping minimise the debt we are taking on, which in turn will speed up our recovery, which allows us to employ more staff, allows us to restart our apprenticeship programme and return to being a London Living Wage employer sooner. All these things I would assume the council would be supportive of.
3 minutes.
Grant of 25,000 works out to be just £140 per employee to White Light, or the equivalent of the point in the system being worth £100, and we score about 250 points under the proposed scheme. But the proposed scheme has a provisional value of £1,000 per point. That is a significant difference. My suggestion is therefore that the ARG is made available to all employers in the borough, and that any payments made under phase 1 are simply deducted from any grants due under phase 2. This means that only small amendments to the proposal, as time is of the essence. If the value of the point is closer to £100, then the system will have been proved to be fair and equitable. I would also question that the £1 million allocated to the Future Wimbledon project, whether it's the best use of money if you want to create jobs. It would be better to use money to provide an incentive scheme to employers to take on new staff, take on apprentices, and enrol in the Kickstart programme with an added incentive for employing Merton residents. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions either now or later.
Okay, thank you very much for your contribution, Mr. Raven. There's no facility for questions, so we appreciate your contribution tonight, which we'll be considering, obviously, in relation to the inadequate resourcing that's been given to councils to support businesses in these circumstances. But I have two cabinet members who I'd like to bring in, who've both been working on the scheme. The first is Councillor Tobin Byers.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start by thanking Mr. Raven for his contribution, and I know he's contacted us all in advance of this evening and had some dialogue with David Kepler as well. I don't think any of us can pretend to understand how difficult the last year must have been for any business, and just listening to the difficulty that he has wrangled with, it is clearly been a terribly tough period for all business owners, and I don't think any of us would pretend anything different. I will come on to some of the points that he's made specifically as I introduce the paper, but I do just want to thank at the outset David Kepler, who I think has done a tremendous job throughout in helping us navigate the different grants that have been available, often overlapping as different sets of restrictions have come in, and Caroline Holland, who's not here this evening but has provided a lot of input into this scheme. I'd also like to thank MBSC and the Chamber of Commerce, who have helped us in the phase 1 distribution of the grants, and I was pleased to hear from Mr. Raven that he found it a very easy process to navigate, because that's what we had intended. The paper then relates primarily to the additional restrictions grant. There is another grant that it deals with, which I'll come on to at the end. And just by way of background, phase 1 of this scheme was agreed in December. And at that point, Cabinet decided to allocate £2 million to phase 1. So we never intended to award any more than £2 million, with the balance being held back for phase 2. As the paper notes, we allocated just shy of 1.1 million under phase 1. And phase 1 was specifically targeted at businesses which hadn't previously qualified for support, like the one that Mr. Raven is responsible for. In terms of phase 2, Councillor Pritchard and I have been working with David Kepler and Caroline Holland and others for several weeks on this. And I think our starting point was that we are never going to have enough money to support all businesses. As Councillor Allison, you've just alluded to, the money that we've been given won't enable us to do that, and we need to recognise that that's simply not going to be possible. Similarly, we were mindful that the level of grants relative to the level of losses is going to be more impactful to some businesses than others. And Mr. Raven alluded to the losses of sort of £4 million and a grant of £25,000. And it's very easy to see how difficult it would be in that situation. But I think we've been mindful that with a reasonably small pot of money, it's better to try and focus it on those businesses where it would have a really direct impact. And that is not in any way saying that those businesses are more or less worthy of support than others. It's just trying to ensure that the money is as well used as possible. Phase 2, as currently drafted, has 2 specific streams of funding, which has already been alluded to. So the first stream is an outward-facing scheme of wider business support initiatives, which will be administered by Future Merchant, and I know Councillor Pritchard will be working closely with officers on that. But we do have the ability to redirect some of that funding into the second stream if it's proving difficult to spend with procurement regulations in the time available. So it's not that it wouldn't be spent, but our ambition at this stage is to spend it through Future Merchant. Stream 2 then is the grant scheme, and it's focused on home run businesses, micro and small businesses. And as I've already said, that's because we believe the level of grants that we're going to be able to distribute under this scheme is going to be most beneficial to that group of businesses. Applicants will be scored both on property costs and on number of employees, and a bonus will be given for merchant-based employees. We have also expanded this slightly to include property costs that aren't business rates, so businesses that might be in shared accommodation, because that was one area that we had a number of applicants for under phase 1 who weren't eligible because of the way phase 1 had been drafted. All applications will then be assessed, and the funding pot will be divided by the total number of points and distributed accordingly. And that way, we believe, will ensure that we are able to spend all of the money. We have also proposed a slight reduction to the entry point to 40% loss of income, whereas previously it was 50%. And grants will be paid out to a cap of 100% of that loss of income. I'll leave there for Councillor Pritchard to add. I would just say in closing that I do fully appreciate that some businesses will be disappointed by this, but I do believe that this ensures that the funding available to us is targeted at those businesses where it can make the biggest difference. I would just also briefly note that the paper also seeks approval of the expanded retail relief policy and seeks a delegation to Caroline Holland in consultation with myself for future such decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And also speaking on this is Councillor Owen Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Raven, for the evidence. I think this was a really difficult grant process to come up with the plan for a number of reasons. Really, the immediacy of the problems that we face. You know, people know it's the sort of worst economic crisis in 300 years, but that is going to be largely defined by a lot of unemployment coming over the next 18 months and possibly 2.5 years until we go back to pre-COVID levels. And I think the spectre of mass unemployment within the borough was something that motivated us to focus very much on keeping people in jobs. Now, set within that context, there was a huge, there was, and there's no other way to say it, it's a very limited sum of money to try and target all the businesses across the borough, right? So, as was highlighted by yourself and, you know, and then by Councillor Byers, by Tobin, the scale of the money that we've got is an order of magnitude, the same order of magnitude as your actual losses, and you're just one firm. So when we looked at it, we decided to focus on 4 areas to reiterate, which were where we think we could make a difference. So micros and smalls, those people employing Merton residents, the quickest way we could do it, and to ensure that we spend it all, more importantly, get as much as we could to the businesses. That's why we settled on this, and that's why we settled on the stream decision as well, which Tobin alluded to, which is where if we're not confident for the reasons of the constraints that we'll be able to spend, we'll flick it into the other stream to try and just get it out to the businesses as quickly as possible. However, when drawing a line, there is always people the other side of the line, and I am sorry, as that someone who owns a business and is partner in the business, and employs people, I can only imagine what a business of your sort of size and scale is going for. But please know that we've done it with the best interest as we see them of the overall residents in mind, and I think it's the best way to spend the small sum of money that we've been given. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Owen. As was mentioned earlier, we have a small number of officers available this evening who may be able to add something further if they'd wish. First of all, Roger Kershaw, but also David Kepler, who's been working very hard on this scheme for us. Was there anything that you would like to add, either of you, to the comments from the Cabinet members?
Chair, the only thing I'd like to add is that there could be some further ARG funding coming along. The government have made an announcement. I was looking tonight at the guidance. It seems that we have to evidence that we've either spent or made good intentions to spend our funding by the 30th of June to be able to qualify or to apply for this further part of funding. So that's something as well we need to bear in mind going forwards.
No further comments from me, Chair.
Very good. So, but still the pot of funding, I'm assuming, would still be very far from enough to pay all of the local businesses, all of what they've lost throughout the pandemic. It's just a small marginal increase. We'd obviously left some funding to one side by splitting the payouts this time over a longer period, but this new money would not, well, it hasn't been made very clear just yet as to how it would be processed, but it's still not the sum that would assist all the businesses that we would want to help. Okay, I don't think there are any further comments. So I'd like to thank Mr. Raven for coming. It's really heartbreaking for so many businesses in our borough, as we've talked about. There's nowhere near enough resourcing available to us to be able to help all the businesses that we would like to. And as a result of that, this is not a decision that we necessarily want to make. It's about coming to a least bad conclusion. And on that basis, are members happy to accept recommendations 1 and 2? Okay, that's agreed. Thank you very much for coming tonight. So we move on to item 7, which is the contract award for school meals catering service. I should say there are a number of items tonight where there are some what we call green papers, and if we were to refer to them, we would need to exclude the public from the meeting. So if I can ask everybody to avoid referring to them, then we can carry out all of our business in public. So to introduce this, Cabinet member responsible is Councillor Eleanor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, this is a decision to award the schools meals catering service from August 2021. And as you say, Mark, I'll talk about it without referencing the confidential information in the back, which includes not naming the bidders who've gone for it. So this is a critical service for our children. I'd like to thank our current provider, Chartwells, for their careful work with head teachers to continue to provide meals COVID safely over the past year when children have been in school, and in their work on provision for pupils who are isolating as well. The previous contract was extended for an additional year, so this comes to an end in July 2021. We've been through a thorough tender process which considers a range of critical criteria such as quality, cost, social value, and commitments to our climate emergency action plan. The confidential appendix outlines how the bidders were scored. We're asking for your permission to approve the award to bidder A for 3 years and to delegate authority for this to be extended to up to 2 years beyond that. All the bidders submitted meal prices that were all small increases on the current price. So given the winning bidders' pricings, the new price for a school meal will be a 5p increase to £2.23 per meal. I'd like to thank the officers who've worked on the tender process and ask for your support for the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Notice that there's the Director of Community and Housing and Interim Director of Children, Schools and Families, Hannah Doody, is here, as well as Murray Davis, who I know has worked on this, and we'd like to thank both of them. But is there anything that either of you would like to add to Councillor Stringer's introduction?
Nothing further to add, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Likewise, Chair.
Perfect. Okay. I think that Councillor Agatha Akagina wanted to just make a point here.
Yes, I just wanted to say, having seen the newspaper with all the food that was supposed to be £30, that was just a mittens actually for the families to eat. I'm just hoping, or shall I say, I trust that nothing like that is happening in our borough here. So I just want your reassurance, really.
Chair, we specifically avoided the use of food parcels and to encourage schools to purchase vouchers on behalf of their pupils who were self-isolating, so that we didn't have any of the issues that have been prevalent in the national press and the complaints that have been highlighted by Marcus Ratchford.
Thank you very much. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Murray. That's very reassuring. I'm sorry that you had to mention a Manchester United player during the course of this evening's proceedings. It's very, very disappointing. There's a black mark against your name from now on. No, we really appreciate the campaigning from Marcus Rashford and totally support it. And the pictures that we saw in the papers were pretty scandalous. So it's very reassuring that we're not doing that practice here. I don't think there were any other comments or contributions from Cabinet. So can we agree the recommendations A to C? Good, a couple of nods and thumbs. So no dissent, we'll agree that and move on to the next business. And item 8 is the financial monitoring report for January 2021. Leading on that is Councillor Tobin Byers again.
Thank you, Chair. And can I start by thanking Caroline Holland, who's taking some well-deserved time off after the budget process, and Roger Kershaw, who's with us this evening, and their respective teams for all of the work that goes into these reports that we receive each month. I also want to thank staff working across all departments for all of the work that they've done in trying to manage the budgets as best they can during what has been an extraordinary financial year. I think the fact that the forecast is that without the pandemic, we would have likely have recorded a favourable variance of nearly £7 million shows just how hard all staff have worked to manage the budgets during this incredibly turbulent period. This is the final report we'll see in the financial year, and it's the one on which the outturn is based. And the report shows a slight reduction in the forecast net adverse variance to £2.6 million. This is primarily due to an increased underspend in children's schools and families, but there is also an underspend, an increased underspend, I should say, in community and housing, and a slight reduction to the overspends in the other departments. So just reiterate my thanks to all the work that's gone in to that. I'd also draw colleagues' attention to the table on page 4, which shows clearly that the council does continue to have a net cost of COVID of nearly £10 million based on all of the additional spend and lost income we've seen and the money that the government has given us by way of recompense. In terms of COVID, I think the report shows how difficult things are going to remain going into the next financial year. Across all departments, there are areas where we will continue to suffer losses of income, where we will continue to see additional costs. And ultimately, in the longer term, we are going to have to look at resetting some of our base budgets to reflect the new normal, as it were, in the post-COVID world. So I think it is going to be a continued challenge, and I know that the impact of COVID is one that we're going to feel well into the next financial year. But I would just like to end by reiterating my thanks to Caroline and Roger at the end of this financial year. I'm sure they can't have worked through many more challenging financial years in their careers. I'm sure we all hope that the next one will be a little bit easier for all of us. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Tobin, and that's a great end point as well, to thank all the staff who've worked so hard on this. Roger, you're still here from the previous item. Is there anything that you would like to add other than taking the praise that we've just given you?
Oh, happily, Chair. Just a couple of things, Chair, to add. You'll also note that there's some recommendations for some environments around the capital schemes, primarily around the decarbonisation grant that we've received £500,000 from central government. There's also a request from CSF for a realignment of their budgets between the non-staffing budgets to staffing budgets, so that they can bring about their implementation of their restructure within the division. And so that helps them do that. It doesn't affect the overall bottom line. It's just really moving budgets between non-staff pay to staff pay. And finally, Chair, you'll note that we have been allowed, or we will be allowed by central government, to spread the cost of all the losses on business rates and council tax over a 3-year period. But we will reflect the proper treatment of that in our outturn report, our final outturn report to Cabinet. Other than that, happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Roger. I think the issues are dealt with very comprehensively within the report, and I can't see any additional people wishing to speak. So if you can, through you can pass on our gratitude to Caroline Holland for her work over this year, and to everyone in the teams that work with you and throughout finance in all of the departments. It's a very professional piece of work. Can we agree recommendations A to C? Okay, that's approved. Thank you. And then the next item, item 9, is the procurement of multiple apprenticeship standards. And the lead member on this is actually Councillor Byers again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you say, this paper relates to the approval of the award of a number of contracts for multiple apprenticeship standards. The proposal is to approve for an initial 3-year term from the 31st of March 2021, with the option of extending for 1 further year. Under the apprenticeship levy, all employers whose gross pay bill exceeds 3 million are required to pay 0.5% in the form of a tax into a centralised account. And this money can then be accessed and spent on the cost of recognised apprenticeship training qualifications. Since this was introduced, the Council has contributed approximately £2.1 million into this pot, and has either drawn down or committed to spend around £900,000. The government also has a target that 2.3% of the local authority workforce should be made up of apprentices. In order to ensure that we can work towards meeting that target, and we are fully utilising the monies available to us, we need to ensure that we have the right service providers in place to deliver the apprenticeship standards. Entering into contracts with multiple providers, which is what is proposed, will ultimately make it easier for us to call off from the providers to deliver different apprenticeship standards at a chosen level as and when required. A lot of the detail for this is on the green papers, so I won't refer to that, but the proposed companies that we're seeking to award the contracts to are set out at the end, and the details are within the green papers, as I say, so I will leave it there, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the introduction there. Also have on the call James Pearce, the Learning and Development Advisor, who's the lead officer on this. James, was there anything that you wanted to add to Councillor Byers' introduction, or anything you wanted to highlight in particular?
Thank you, Chair. No, there's no further thing I wanted to mention, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, well, thanks very much for your report, which is very good report. Councillor Cooper Marbia indicated she wanted to just add something.
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. I'm very pleased that this paper has come to Cabinet, and looking at the timeline, should this go through successfully, implementation is imminent. Apprenticeship is a great way for people to improve their skills and progress in their careers. So this is very timely as we look forward to the recovery from COVID-19. This is going to be a boost to apprenticeship offer and increase the workforce development opportunities in Merton, and I fully support it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline, and I'll just add my thanks to you really for your support for apprenticeships in general, in your commitment to improving the skills and opportunities for our residents. Councillor Byers, you want to come back in again?
Chair, it was very remiss of me, having thanked officers on my previous two reports. I didn't thank them on this one, so I would just like to thank James and everyone who's contributed to this, because a lot of work has gone into what are clearly quite a number of contracts and quite a number of bidders. So I did just want to make sure my thanks were noted. Thank you, Chair.
Of course, I think that that everybody understood that you were very grateful to officers anyway, so nothing remiss there. It's certainly not as bad as mentioning any footballers from Manchester United, so I shouldn't worry too much about that. But with that in mind, thank you to James and to your colleagues for your work on this. Is everybody happy to agree recommendations A and B as in the report? Again, a few nods, no shakes. So I'll take that as no dissent. So that's agreed. And as all of the rest of the items in the on the papers are all exempt items, we've actually dealt with all the business without needing to refer to those. So that's the end of the business for tonight. I'd like to thank everybody for coming, all the officers and staff and members of the public. Also, a couple of other councillors, Councillor Peter Southgate and Nick McLean, I've seen on the call as well. So thank you to them for coming and supporting the meeting tonight. Other than that, see you all soon. Bye-bye.